Welcome to Letters to Louie with Abbey, Algiers. Welcome back, Abbey.
Thank you, Sally.
We were discussing the upcoming letter here that you're going to be reading today, and we had one in mind, and you had found this morning, and it has to deal with drug companies and the big pharma companies, and who's making money off of who, and how that's even being regulated.
Right.
And it's perfect for the climate we're in, again, here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have you read that and share it, and then we'll talk about it when you're finished.
Okay, sounds good. Dear Louie, Dr. Horowitz's snake oil. During the early to mid 1950s, an annual medicine show would appear in town and be set up at the Schwartz Park. There, for 2 nights, many would assemble and, in a carnival atmosphere, listen attentively to the pitchmen of the show. Tonics were sold, diagnoses were suggested to the crowd, and all sorts of ailments were addressed. Music, talking, and showmanship addressed the many complaints of the crowd. The power of suggestion of the pitchmen convinced many of the diagnoses and cures. Many who bothered with aches, pains, and often true disease were encouraged to address their complaints and seek cures from the pharmacological wares of Dr. Horowitz. Women with complaints of prolonged menses, middle smarts, and rough postpartum courses were encouraged to use Lydia Pinkin's tonic. This tonic was impressive. It made one feel better. 12% alcohol has a tendency to flush the face and make one feel a bit giddy. 1 ounce 3 times a day did help. When associated with a ferrous sulfate, the red blood count would, over time, improve common iron deficiency state, seen often in the postpartum women. It did on occasion help. However, the most popular item sold for $3 a bottle. It was Dr. Horowitz's arthritis cure. Just rub it in 3 times a day, each aching joint. This topical application was a liniment, a smelly liquid, which increased skin temperature, increased blood flow to the skin, and smelled like comfort. The first, second, and third applications seemed to help. The 4th, 5th, and 6th applications became an irritant, and by the 3rd day the show was out of town and the skin was irritated, sometimes with blisters. About the 5th day after the show, I would see 1 or 2 patients to treat that skin irritation, and I would suggest aspirin and acetaminophen for the osteoarthritis and underlying bursitis. The skin blisters usually smelled. This routinely happened on an annual basis, but the nights were interesting and it was a real social event. No harm was really done. And by the same time next year, the skin irritation was forgotten, the anemias were again present, and the citizens awaited the return of the Dr. Horowitz medicine show. Recently, I found Dr. Horowitz's modern equivalent. I'd been placed on a drug used in the management of cholesterol control. The prescription was filled. It was the generic equivalent of Zocor, an effective anti-cholesterol drug, one of the modern equivalencies of the Fountain of Youth. As usual, I read the package insert, and learned that Simvatistan was manufactured by Dr. Reddy's laboratory, located in India. Thoughts of Dr. Horowitz's medicine show flashed through my mind. I wondered, why India? Why, in this modern day of medical marvels, would a Dr. Reddy's laboratory in India make a generic equivalent sold by the pharmacy of Aurora Medical Services? Was this a modern medicine show? Was this an FDA-approved facility? I investigated. I called the local pharmacy and was told the pharmacist knew little of Dr. Reddy's reliability, operation, and function. Aurora Corporate was responsible for drug purchases and associations. And I investigated Dr. Reddy's laboratory in India. The operation, one of the 5 largest generic operations in India, was begun in 1981 to manufacture methyldopa. Since that time, the corporation had expanded into a massive drug producer, producer of generic drugs and now anticipating the production of cancer chemotherapeutic agents. It is a gigantic house, one of the largest in the generic foreign producers. The US, Russia, Italy, Germany, and India are the big producers of generic drugs. All supposedly have been accredited by the FDA. Dr. Reddy's laboratory was accredited in 2007. Since then, no further inspections have supposedly been done. I spoke with Aurora Corporate and found that corporate, as is common, bids on all generic drug purchases, and Dr. Reddy's laboratory is, at this time, an accepted provider. Accepted and engaged on the basis of cost and supposedly FDA approval. I addressed the recent melamine supplementation in one of the Chinese providers of baby formula. Melamine supplementation to increase the nitrogen concentration resulted in the formation of renal stones in young infants, the deaths of a number of children, and stone formation in many Chinese and U.S. children. When investigated, it appears that some attendees or principals of the Chinese company juiced the formulas, and the resulting trial of the culprits had resulted in death sentences for the perpetrators. Supposedly, the controls were not adequate. A few years ago, a drug in South Korea was found to cause sustained hypertension and death when the preparation was compromised. In each of these cases, the FDA had approved the production facility but had not re-inspected it. When the FDA's position of oversight and inspection is investigated, it becomes evident that the department is greatly understaffed and under-budgeted. And this is for the U.S. alone. When the sites of foreign production and purchase centers are added to the equation, it becomes nearly impossible to have any control. The integrated medical providers of the present day, when searching for the best price, have no hesitancy to go global in their search for the best price. Oversight becomes of secondary importance. The development of multi-specialty groups has resulted in providing excellent care to large contiguous populations. Diagnostic tools, primarily manufactured in the U.S., have provided excellent tools which are married to the well-trained physician providers. The result has been excellence of care. I fear that in the search for profit and improvement in the bottom line, the outsourcing of all aspects of medicine will follow the trend in generic production of medicine. Generic medical centers are being set up in India, Israel, and other centers of global influence. It may soon prove that to save costs and probably lose control, outsourcing of much medical care will be encouraged by the self-proclaimed medical experts of the present system. I make a comparison. Dr. Horowitz had a product, a spiel, had a message, had no quality control, but had pizzazz. Some integrated groups have excellent products, good advertising, and convincing public relations departments, but may be embarking on poor quality control. Perhaps the music of the Horowitz Medicine Show will again be heard in the community, and the 3-day-old smell will again be evident. Keep the faith, Louie. Jim.
While you were reading that, I was running through my mind all of the news articles, whether you see them on television or whether you're reading them about the big pharma companies and who's in control and who's governing that.
Right. And the costs of the medicines. And
Right. And why are there generics and why don't we just buy the medicine from the provider who first made it? Why are we going to secondary? Because of the cost.
Exactly.
So it's a complete racket out there,
Right.
if you will,
Right.
of medicine with people's lives at stake, obviously.
Right.
And were they held accountable?
Right. It's a racket and a vicious cycle that
Right.
just,
Right, and continues on. So are we, I know that clinically these drugs do help, especially with hypertension and those types of things, but all of the other supplements that are out there that are purported to help with this or that, and you can probably do your own diagnosis yourself, try them if it helps, if not, But there's a lot out there.
Right. And there's a lot of great advertising and great pageantry, like
Right.
Dr. Horowitz, you know.
Right. And trying to convince the viewer that they're not okay. This is how you look. This is how you should look. This is the mold.
Right.
It can be very,
Here's the magic,
right.
the magic product.
Very
for you.
lucrative.
Right, definitely.
Yeah. And for your dad, obviously, to see the foresight in that,
Oh,
it's still prevalent today. I don't know if that'll ever go away.
right, exactly. The letter was written in 2007,
Okay.
but I remember
Wow.
him for years talking about Dr. Horowitz and the show.
And I could visualize that too. It had to be a big party out there.
Yeah,
at the
definitely.
Schwartz Park. That's
Right.
funny. He really, again, very insightful. Part of that from his memories of growing up, but also his training
Right,
in medicine and applying that.
right. He kind of saw both sides to it, the history of Hartford happening along with the history of medicine,
Yeah,
and then took a look at it in 2007.
amazing again.
I-
Thank you for
Yes.
coming in and sharing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And to our viewers, as always, thank you for watching.